let me start with understanding a little bit about who is on the call today, um, so that we can get to know you a little bit better. Um, Let me see this. 1 second. Seems to be a little bit of a problem. Okay. Alrighty. I'm launching a quick poll here because would love to understand what segment do users or the participants of the webinar fall in, so that we can tailor the webinar accordingly. All right, I'm at about 50% participation. I'm hoping some of you can also fill in what you a little bit about your listing sizes and about portfolio analytics if you're using it already. Gives me a sense of who's on the call. Okay. We're at about 80%. If you just joined in, if you can fill in the survey, that'll be helpful. And I'm going to stop it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Very helpful, very helpful, guys. Thank you so much for sharing this. We have a fair amount of mix, and I'm just going to quickly share the results so that you guys can see it too. We have about 63% who are less than 10 listings, 30% 10 to 50, and one more than 50. And then 50-50 in terms of already using portfolio analytics versus haven't used portfolio analytics yet. So we're going to cover right from basics as we get into the webinar today. I am going to share my screen, and we're actually directly going to go into the product and talk directly through the product. If someone can confirm if they can see my screen, if you can send me a yes on chat, that would be super helpful.
Yes.
I am your host for today. My name's Richie. I'm one of the co-founders at PriceLabs. We recently started running this portfolio analytics webinar. In fact, this is the very first one in this series. We will be recording this webinar. All our webinars go on YouTube a day after we're done with them, and because you've registered, you'll also receive an email from us with the link to this webinar recording. Now, today, we're here to talk about portfolio analytics. Portfolio analytics is essentially a business intelligence tool that is built on top of your reservation history. The purpose for building this is so that you can very easily and quickly analyze what's happening in your bookings, rather than taking that, putting into an Excel and working through complicated stuff. Right now, depending on the number of properties that you have, some of this may be immediately relevant versus some may not be very quickly relevant. But we'll talk through a few things. So bear with me. Also, do want to specify that we have 3 products: dynamic pricing, which I'm assuming a lot of you already use PriceLabs for, which is automating your rate updates to your property management system or Airbnb or VRBO every day. Number 2, we have market dashboards. This is market data. Because we capture so much market data for dynamic pricing, we also showcase that in market dashboards, which people use for either advanced revenue management strategies or for purchasing new properties or acquiring new owners, etc. If you're interested in that, we did a webinar on it yesterday. It should be live on our YouTube channel. If not, it'll go live in the next 24 hours. And then finally, the third product that we have is portfolio analytics. Portfolio analytics is a free to use product. We do have limitations of some PMSs that we today don't work with. We're constantly adding property management systems. Also, we work with Airbnb, but today we don't work with VRBO. We're adding that limitation as well, that integration as well. if you're using a property management system and they are connected to Airbnb, VRBO, any booking channel, then the data would be complete. If you're using PriceLabs directly with VRBO, we don't fully get that data today. Again, specifying this, if Portfolio Analytics is a free to use software, it is essentially your data that we are massaging and showing it to you so that you can make certain better decisions about how your business is going. Portfolio Analytics, there are several use cases. I'll today try to cover this product Portfolio Analytics in use case terms, right? In terms of trying to figure out what each of the things mean, while I'll cover that during the webinar, but you'll also find this helpful help article right in the left side. If you click that, it will take you to the help article, which describes everything to the T. So don't want to waste your time describing everything. I want to talk a little bit about use cases. Also, I do want to specify at the right bottom here, we have help and chat. So if you have like either questions about like what something is in PriceLabs, you can always search for anything. And also, if you have questions that aren't answered via chat and you want to speak to someone, you can press chat and ask any questions. Depending on the volume, we may be able to immediately answer or get back to you in some time. Cool. With that, like I said, the webinar is getting recorded. If you have questions, that you'd see the Zoom Q&A thing at the bottom. Feel free to ask questions there. Anything that, as I go through the webinar, anything that I think I should address immediately during the webinar, I will do that. If not, I'll do it at the end of the webinar. Cool. Now, the very first thing that how to get to Portfolio Analytics is in PriceLabs in the top black bar. You'd find it at the top. You'll see Portfolio Analytics. If you click that, you'll end up in a screen that looks slightly different. It looks like an empty screen. Let me actually quickly open one. It looks like this, where you see all of these filters and you'd see analytics, right? Now, because we are compressing a lot of data and analyzing it, we don't immediately show you data. We have these filters that you can see and then click see analytics. Now, for example, you may want to only look for data about listings that you're syncing with PriceLabs. You may have added tags. And if you've not added tags, I would recommend, especially if you get to 5, 10, 20 properties, looking at tags. Again, for the purpose of this webinar, not going to get into tags a whole lot, but go into the help knowledge base and look for tags and see how you can use them. You can also select just a few listings or individual listing if you wanted to see their analytics. And then if you have started to use groups, again, if you're that 10 plus listing user, would recommend looking into what groups are or doing one of PriceLabs 201. You can filter by groups. And that way you can look at very nuanced set of data rather than looking at overall data set, right? So you'll click and see analytics, and something like this will load. This is a very graph heavy thing, so don't get overwhelmed. These are fairly simple to read information. It's just sometimes can seem overwhelming because there's a bunch of it here. The very first use case that we should talk about is occasionally, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, when you're trying to understand how your business, how your listing has done historically, right? So one of the quick ways for you to do that is these key performance indicators, where I may want to go in and by default, it shows the last 30 days compared with the 30 days before that. So it's showing November 8th to December 7th, which is today. So last 30 days compared with the previous 30 days, but you could compare any time horizons. So for example, I may want to compare how my November 2022 did in comparison to November 2021. And we're working on making these filters a little bit better in coming months, right? So you can quickly see how my business did this year in comparison to last year. Revenue, very clear metric. This is how much you made. length of stay, how long are people staying for, average LOS, length of stay. And you can see how that compares to prior period, same number of reservations. Essentially gives you a very quick historical snapshot and comparison against a prior period to seeing how your business is doing. Now, if you, this is a single quick KPI. You can see this by stay date. Stay date is on the dates when people are staying. So November month, how many people stayed, or how much revenue did you make? How many reservations did you get during the month of November? The other thing that sometimes you may want to look at is booking creation dates, because you're looking at sometimes and you're going, oh, I wonder if this year November or this year first week of December is slower than last year, right? You can quickly see December 1 to say December 7, first 7 days, compared to last year, December 1, December 7, for booking creation dates. That means all the bookings that came in, and ignore my data set. It may have certain problems. But yeah, all the bookings that came in for that period, right? And it'll quickly show you, hey, yes, your revenues seem to be down, your length of stay seem to be up, number of reservations that you got were significantly lower, and in your markets they could be higher, it could be very different, right? But you get the idea. Where if you're trying to quickly understand, hey, how is my business trending right now? Is it slower than last year? Is it faster than last year? You can quickly gauge that via the booking creation date, and via the stay date, you can get a sense of how your revenues are doing. Now, this is a snapshot of the month, but maybe you want to look at larger periods where we have trends by stay date. I'm going to get into trends by stay date, but let me quickly hop in and see if any questions. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know in the Q&A, and we'll cover that. And yeah, sorry, I was just seeing if the chat was enabled. Looks like it is. Cool. Okay. Going into trends by stay date. Again, what we're talking about is looking at your performance every so often. This is not a daily, weekly thing where you look at something daily, weekly, but maybe once a month, once in 2 months, you're looking at what's happening, right? So we've covered key performance indicators where you can quickly see the summary, but maybe you want to look at, hey, how is it trending? So in trends by stay date, we show you information around the last 5 years, and we have 4 graphs that we think are immediately relevant for most people, but there are other graphs that we can see. But let me explain what's happening here. One, you can aggregate this data by monthly, weekly, daily, or day of week. So if I click this, if I go into weekly, these graphs will show you weekly data. If I go into daily, they'll literally show you daily data. And if I go back to monthly, it'll aggregate to monthly, right? The next thing is for all of these graphs, you'll see this legend at the bottom. 2019 is that dotted very light gray line. 2020, we show the last 3 years, current year and future 1 year, so that you can try to get a sense of how your business is doing. You'll see on the left axis here, whatever metric we are trying to track. So for example, revenue, you'll see USD, occupancy, you'll see percentage, average booked rate, you'll see USD again. And you can click into any of these and you can change your view. We have revenue, RevPAR, occupancy, average book rate, and a few other data that you can look at. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not detailing out every single thing, going more use case by use case. Okay, so now if I want to understand, hey, how is my if I just want to understand what does my revenue pattern for 2022 look like, I can clearly see, hey, my summer months are high, and then by the time I get into like my Jan months are generally low. If I compare that to 2021, very similar trend. Of course, December, we still have days to catch up. So this number, revenue number will catch up and become higher. dummy data, not my real business. So this is all dummy data, not running $1 million property management business. Um, but you can quickly see that. And also, if you click on any of these legends, these turn on and off, right? The kind of insights that you can draw from here is, hey, how am I doing relative to last year or relative to prior years in terms of revenue? How was my occupancy trending, right? Oftentimes, we may not immediately realize how my occupancy is trending. So you can see this historical level where you can see, hey, how is my occupancy trending for the months that have already gone by? But I can also see for future, for example, for the month of December, where am I in terms of occupancy versus what the final occupancy was in prior years, right? I can start to give you a sense. Similarly, average book rate, is my ADR this year higher or lower than last year, right? Ideally, for US markets, particularly because of inflation, your ADRs, your average book rate would generally be higher or should be higher, unless you're in a market that's seeing a slowdown. And then RevPAR is a very, very important metric because it helps you understand for um, a combination of your revenue and occupancy. So because in this case, you see, hey, my revenues are so much higher, but my occupancy is materially lower. And in RevPAR, that number comes together and it says, even though your revenues in October were so much higher and your occupancy was so much lower, in terms of RevPAR, they start to become closer. And so that's a metric that you want to track and understand. Normally, RevPAR is one of the best metrics that you want to track and say, hey, am I doing better than last year or worse than last year? Again, you can hop in here and see a few other data sets. I'll scroll down and I'll also talk about the booking date trends, because here again, in very similar way, just like stay date trends, booking date trends, we can see the same data set, but this time by booking creation date, so that I can see, am I getting more bookings this November? Bookings, not stays, right? Am I getting more bookings this November for any future date than prior year, right? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? You can try to maybe make a little bit of sense of that. So that's use case one. Use case one, where you're trying to compare your historical performance against another historical period, right? So you can quickly see it via KPIs, by trends by stay date, and by booking date creation. Use case number two that I see very often is, oftentimes people don't fully understand what their length of stays, average length of stays are, what their average booking windows are, right? We show that to you in that summary graphs, right? But here you can also see, for example, if I just wanted to see my month of November by, and maybe I just want to see by stay dates, right? I'll be able to see in month of November what was the booking window in 2022, and what were the length of stays. This helps us inform a little bit better about how we should think about our minimum stay strategy. And I've said this a few times, minimum stay strategy is one of the best levers that you have in revenue management for vacation rentals, of course, along with pricing. But minimum stay strategy is something that you should definitely think about. If you've not looked at it, go to our YouTube channel and find how minimum stay restrictions and PriceLabs work. It's like we've done a fantastic job at the tutorial there. You would notice that we always, by default, we look at booked nights, and in both of these, very often when I get on calls with folks, they talk about, hey, most of my bookings are one nights or two nights. But the reality is, what you want to look at is how many booked nights are you getting from that one night to night. You might get a 10 one night reservations, which yield to 10 booked nights, and you might get only 2 5-night reservations, but they still yield to 10 booked nights. And unless you have special discounts for length of stay, for you, both of those are equal. And in some ways, the booking 5-day booking is better, because you can, of course, less check-in and check-out, less operational needs, etc., etc., right? So we also always want to look at book nights because our mind has this fallacy or a bias where we say, oh, I'm getting a lot more one night bookings. My minimum stay should be one night. No, let's go look at what is your book night's average length of stay, right? That's really what you want to drive for, not the volume of reservations, right? That should be your main driver of how to think about your minimum stay restrictions. So again, in this section, you can very quickly find and you can compare whatever periods, right? Like if I want to see, hey, all of my like the just after my high season, my shoulder season, what did my stay restrictions look like in shoulder season? And you can further dive in if you click this, you can further dive in by book nights, but also like a very complicated graph, but helpful if you want to read it, where it shows you how both the combination of booking window and length of stay together come together. So for example, in this, what we're saying is there are about 17 stays that were, or not 17 stays, there are about 17 stays that were 1 day long. There were 897 book nights that were 2 days long, and they came in within the 2 to 4 booking window. So it's helpful for you to understand as you set up your stay restrictions. So that's use case number two, right? For us to understand how we are doing in terms of length of stay and booking trends itself, right? So again, use case number one, where we are trying to understand how our listings are performing historically. We can quickly see that from KPIs. Use case KPIs, and if we want to dive in a little bit more, we can see that from trends by stay date. Use case number two, where we want to understand how the length of stay of our listings and booking windows are trending, so that we know how, if we're adding stay restrictions or if we're adding last minute discounts, we know how to deal with those, right? With that data. Use case number three, where you're actively trying to understand how am I pacing in the market? What kind of pickup do I have? I've said two terms. Pacing refers to how am I doing this year in comparison to last year, and ideally for forward-looking data, right? Remember, when we looked at KPIs, you're looking at historical, those dates have already gone by, and we're just seeing how are we doing, how did we do this year compared to, say, prior year, or this month compared to last month. But when we talk about pacing, we're saying for my forward-looking dates, how am I doing relative to last year? And pickup is the other metric that I mentioned. Pickup is what I'm trying to understand is what occupancy did I gather in a certain period of time. As I look at these graphs, it'll make a little bit more sense. So you'll see this section here, which talks about pacing. Now, the use case number three that we're going to talk about is how do we use these portfolio analytics to make some decisions on forward-looking data. So I'm going to ignore this listing price graph. Essentially, because I've not used any filter, this is a summary of all of my listings prices. But if I used any of these filters and did see analytics, the prices would accordingly look like whatever listings I have selected, right? I'm going to come back to this pricing graph. Let's talk about this occupancy graph first. In the occupancy graph, what you'd see is quickly, hey, what's my current occupancy for future dates? And what was my occupancy last year as of today for the same dates, right? As of today, not your final occupancy. You can find your final occupancy, for example, on December 17th, as of December 18th, 2020, sorry, December 17th here and December 18th on the previous one. But as of today, which is December 7th of 2021, I had 62% occupancy, but today I have 40% occupancy. My occupancy for that December 17th date is trending 30 days below, about 34% below, right? And what we have done here is we're not comparing exact dates. We do compare day of weeks to make it a little bit like for like, right? Because your Saturday on December 17th, comparing December 17th, which is a Friday, may not be as useful as comparing the December 18th Saturday. So you can quickly see that how you're trending, and this can help you make certain decisions. For example, if I was to see this in my data, I would be like, hey, my December is trending significantly below my 2021 occupancy numbers, right? I want to understand maybe it's the market in general. If it's the market in general and maybe I can't do anything about it, um, or maybe it's something to do with my pricing, or maybe it's something to do with my distribution, but I quickly get a sense that I am trending significantly below. Now, what you can also see is that once these Jan, Feb, normally you'd expect this from occupancy graph, where your occupancy in the most recent days is higher, and then over time it continues to drop because you've still not received bookings for those far out dates. But for this, what I would do in such a scenario is I would go in and add some last minute discounts, or look at if I want to relax my stay restrictions or do something. The exact action can vary, but it gives you a quick sense of, okay, I'm trending below last year. Do I need to do something, or do I need to worry about something, right? One thing to note, if you're new to PriceLabs, we do change how your pricing structure completely works. So you will see how how you pace compared to last year will vary, because maybe you were booking too far in advance because your prices were too low, and we start increasing prices, so you'd book a little bit later, versus maybe you had prices too high and you were booking really late, and we dropped your prices. You'll start booking a little bit earlier, right? So be conscious of that. But this helps you quickly understand how, like, what you should do in terms by looking at this future data. You should look at and change in your properties. Again, you can also not again. And then finally, you can also add pickup here. Remember when I said pickup is what percent of the today's occupancy, which is say December, on December 18th, again, I have 40% occupancy, or 36% occupancy. Of that, 4.5% occupancy came in last 7 days. This is not very promising. Normally, if I see a spike here, I feel comfortable that, hey, okay, in the last 7 days, 4.5% came, I'll get more and more, but this doesn't look very promising. So I'll definitely want to go in and see, hey, what can I do to actually boost my occupancy levels? Similarly, while I have compared occupancies, I want to compare ADRs and see how am I doing in terms of my average daily rate. My average daily rate number, again, I can see my average daily rate number today and last year. Normally, what you'd see is you'd want to see generally your ADR slightly higher, adjusted for inflation, unless you think that there is a slowdown in the market, in which case they should be a little bit lower, right? But what you can also quickly track here is if on certain dates last year you had really high ADRs and you don't have in the current period ADRs that high, you may want to think about, for example, in this April, May end, I may want to go in and think about why are my ADRs not high? Is PriceLabs not detecting some event? Should I go add some minimum stay restrictions? Is that something very local to my market that is just not getting picked up, right? But you may want to think a little bit about that, right? Normally, you'd want to see your ADR slightly higher than last year because generally inflation, unless there is a slowdown in the market. And the next thing that you're really trying to understand is, are there certain days that had higher ADRs last year, but I'm not seeing that in current pricing graphs? Maybe I want to go in and tweak that. Number 3, RevPAR. If you remember RevPAR as a metric, this is the metric that a lot of revenue managers, a lot of hoteliers use, where they want to quickly understand how their whole units are selling, because ADRs can be deceiving, and your occupancy can be deceiving. RevPAR brings that together. It's in some ways essentially revenue for you, right? And so you can quickly see how that's trending. So if you recall, if I go up here, if you recall, on December 10th, my occupancy was lagging. And so my alarm bells could go off and say, oh my God, on December 10th, I am 15% behind. My business is not doing great. But you'd also see my ADRs are significantly higher on December 10th. So my RevPAR is significantly higher, about 50% higher. So it's not all that bad, right? But here I do want to catch up on RevPAR in this December period. I see my ADRs are kind of similar. So my occupancy, I have to figure out how can I drive my occupancy, maybe by dropping my ADRs a little bit and driving my occupancy a little bit higher. That's one of the solutions. But again, this tool is gives you the analytics so that you can start thinking about your business a little bit more. Cool. Summarizing. So three use cases. Number one, if we want to compare our performance that's already happened with another periods, we'd quickly go into KPI and see the summary. This is also something that, if I can drop down, select some listings and send to owners as well. Number two, if I want to compare my historical periods a little bit better or understand a little bit about the future, I can see in these summary graphs and I compare prior 5 years, 5 years, prior 3 years and current year and the future 1 year. And if I wanted to change these graphs, I can look at some of the other graphs as well, which is like number of check-ins, number of checkouts, number of unique bookings, etc. Um, I can also see similar information by creation date. So that's use case one, where I'm comparing my historical information with prior periods. Number two, where I'm trying to understand my length of stay and booking window trends, because these are important restrictions that you apply when you are trying to manage your pricing on top of the dynamic pricing that PriceLabs does. Would highly recommend stay restrictions if you're not using them. They're a very good lever in vacation rentals. Use case number three, where we are trying to understand how we are doing relative to prior years, right? Am I trending faster for how am I doing relative to prior year for future dates? Am I pacing faster? Is my ADR similar, higher? Is my ref bar similar, higher? And what can I then you can start thinking about what can you do about this, right? I'm going to pause and quickly see if there are any questions. Either I'm doing a good job or a very bad job. It's very unusual for me to not see any questions. Would love a yes or no to know if I'm doing an okay job. Again, if you have questions, I have another 25 minutes. I think I have another 5 to 10 minutes of content, and then I'll open up for questions if you want to ask them, or keep them flowing in, and I can answer those as well. Use case number three, right? Which is, by the way, I should have mentioned this. Anywhere in PriceLabs, if you see these this kind of things, it essentially specifies there are more options available. So if I go up and let's say by booking creation date, if I click this, it tells you, hey, you can download this data if you wanted to do something about it, right? Similarly, if I go into this, it again tells you you can download the raw data or you can download the charts as well if you wanted to do something about it. Okay, use case number three, and this is where I'm going to use this side of it. One, I'm seeing 6 months. I could change that to whatever horizon I wanted to see. Maybe I want to see only 1 month. Maybe I want to see 1 year or some custom time frame. And this is currently aggregated daily. You could also see this weekly or monthly, right? So that's hopefully that's straightforward. The use case number four is when I want to compare my performance against my market, right? Now, for this, you'd need a market dashboard subscription. If you're not familiar with market dashboards, I did a webinar yesterday on market dashboards. You can find it on YouTube. We do this every month on 6th of every month. So you can also register for our future webinars, and you'd find market dashboards up in the top corner here. So what I'm doing here is, let's say, let's assume all of my properties were in LAX Vale Piano area, and I wanted to compare my properties against an Airbnb 2-bedroom comp set, right? And I want to apply. Now, what you'd see, actually, let me for now remove this. Yeah, what you'd see here is now I can, of course, it matters a lot on terms of what market and what comp set I've chosen, because it has to be the right one. But what you can quickly see is how are my prices compared to the properties in that market. You see a very similar graph in neighborhood data. The value of seeing it here is when you want to look at a portfolio. Say maybe you want to look at a group of all 2 bedrooms in lower Manhattan, right? In neighborhood data, you see it for each property, but here you can see it for, say, all of your lower Manhattan properties. Had you created a group for it, or had you created a tag for it, right? And then you can see quickly, okay, how are all of these properties as average? Where are they trending? And you can also see maybe there are certain dates where the market is increasing prices, but you are not. And so you can quickly see that, right? What you can also see, and now this graph becomes a little bit too complicated. So let me, by the way, in PriceLabs, if you click on any of the legends, these things, right? They go, like, the lines go away. And if you click back on them, the lines come back, right? So what I'm seeing here is, hey, my current market occupancy for the market that I've chosen is at this percentage. My occupancy, uh, on the other hand, is doing very, very well. This is great, but that might mean I have opportunity to maybe increase pricing, right? Again, dummy data, so can't really draw insights from this, but maybe I have opportunity to increase pricing. Option number um, 2, I look at market occupancy and I see market occupancy same time last year. If you'd see, it was trending fairly similar last year. And in fact, for all practical purposes, we are only higher. So the whale piano area is actually doing fairly well. But we are, for the most part, we are higher. Versus if I see my occupancy, I'm doing better than the market, but compared to last year, I'm doing not as good. So I'd want to think about, hey, while I'm doing better than the market, so it's not all panic, but was I doing something differently last year, and should I think about that, right? So that's use case number 3, where we can compare against market, how am I pacing, and how are my occupancies doing. Right. And again, you can add pickup. Now it gets really complicated, but I'll remove all of this and show you only pickup lines, where you can see, hey, for certain dates, I am picking up faster. For example, for let's say December 30th, right? December 30th, I am, where is it? Yeah. December 30th, I'm picking up a lot faster than the market. Maybe I want to increase my prices, right? Now, but in some dates I'm picking up slower, I'm fine with it. Particularly, I don't worry about pickup, especially if we are like 30 days, 60 days, like if you're outside your booking window. And remember, you get your booking window by looking at these graphs, right? You say, like, while it's hard to come up with an average number here quickly, but you can see what the trends are. And so in this, I would generally say your booking window, just by looking at it, maybe somewhere between 14 days to like slightly higher than 14 days. And you can get a real number by looking at it here, which here it's called lead time. But you can get a quick gauge by looking at it here, that, hey, it was 32 days. And if I just wanted to look at it in November, it was 27 days. So if my lead time was 27 days, and if I come back here, I'm not super worried about my pacing. If I'm pacing behind the market, if I have pickup behind the market for outside of those 27, 30 days, because as I get closer to that booking window, I should start picking up. I don't want to pick up any faster. So yeah, that's use case number 3. I know that's a lot to digest, but as you think about it, as you dive into this data, I'm sure you'll have questions. Feel free to email us here again. These, I would say, if you're clicking chat, and chat generally is for that quick, like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? But if you're like more detailed, hey, I want to understand why so and so is happening, usually not as like, the chat is not going to be as helpful. That's more, it's better if you raise a support ticket, because that would mean we ideally, the best way for us to help you is take time, take 15 minutes, take 20 minutes to really dive into that data. Chat for those quick, hey, how do I do this? Dive into the data. Let's, like, shoot us an email so that we actually can take that time, and you're not waiting on 20 minutes, nor are we pressured to give you an immediate answer. Um, cool. So again, use case number one, where I want to compare my performance that has already happened with some prior periods. Use case number two, I want to look at length of stay and booking window graphs to understand how I can use stay restrictions better. Use case number three, where I want to look at pacing graphs. So where I get rid of uh, where Hmm, I did not know there's no way to get rid of market dashboards once you've added them. Use case number three, where I want to look at how my listing is doing compared to last year, so that I can make better sense of, am I trending good? Am I trending bad? Occupancies, ADRs, RevPARs. Use case number four, where I want to now start comparing it against market to seeing, should I be adjusting something? Should I be tweaking something? Again, realize PriceLabs is doing a lot of this already, but once you start having portfolios, you may want to actively manage some of it too, right? Um, Use case number five is a little bit more complex. It's to do with when you have when you have larger portfolios, right? This is the listing level metrics section. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that it's a little bit more visible. And 1 second. Sorry, and while I do that, Antonio, you asked me where did I click, but I think you got it yourself, so not answering that. And then, okay, I'm seeing some questions. Guys, if you have questions, would really appreciate if you can send them in the Q&A, because it helps me keep track of what's been sent and what's been answered and what's not been answered. Uh, but while I'm waiting for this to load, let's see. Willie, days since last booked is useful, but some listings that are overbooked or occupied, you can have larger or greater than 30 days. Days since last booked may appear to look bad, but it is not. How do you solve? I'm going to come back to it, Willie. More complex question. Quick question. Thank you so much, Carlos, for sending it in the Q&A. Helpful for me to keep track. And then Billy, I'm going to come back to your question in a bit. Let me cover this last piece here. All right. Um, the last piece that I wanted to cover is listing level metrics. Once you start having a little bit of a portfolio and a little bit of your listings, right? While we have looked at all of the other trends, you may want to also compare, hey, how are my listings doing at an aggregate? Now, if you use PriceLabs and dynamic pricing already, you know that you can quickly see how your listings are doing comparison to the market by looking at these health metrics, right? And you also see those health metrics very quickly here, right? But what if I want to look at a bunch of my listings together and try to understand what's happening, right? Here, I can very quickly see all of my listings plotted together now, and what I'm plotting is listing occupancy versus market occupancy, right? And here, what I can see is the ones in red, and this is PriceLabs' own scoring method, right? But ones that are in red, they're trending behind market occupancies. And so these are the ones that I want to look at. These are trending above market occupancies. Maybe I don't really want to look at it, right? But this is one of the ways that you can say, hey, if I want to focus my energy as a revenue manager or as property manager on certain properties, um, if I'm trending significantly behind market occupancies, this is a quick way I want to go in and see. It's not always price, guys, remember. It could be your photos, it could be your distribution channels, it could be your fees on those properties, it could be something else altogether, but you know that those properties are trending behind market, and you can get a quick sense of what part of your portfolio is doing that. That's use case number one. Now, not use case number one. Use case is our listing level metrics, but how I can try to interpret this data, right? The number two thing that you can sometimes quickly see is you often hear about, hey, what occupancy is the right number to target, right? So I can quickly see, I want to compare my, let's say, listing revenue against my listing occupancy here. Okay. So I'm now comparing if you see listing revenue versus my listings paid occupancy, how occupied was I, right? And you can see it's not always all equal, right? These listings were doing are very occupied. And again, I've not filtered down. Ideally, you want to filter down with like for like listings to make better sense of this data. But hey, these listings, while they're running very high occupancies, they're not doing as well in terms of revenues versus this listing, even though it only has 50% occupancy, is doing really, really well. When you're comparing like for like listings or listings in similar market, you'll be able to make better sense of, hey, what's my occupancy number that I'm targeting that is driving revenues and where those ADRs sit. Use case number 3, I may want to quickly see what my listing occupancy is and days since last booked, right? So I can see here these listings, although their listing occupancy is low, but they're starting to get bookings. But these listings right here in the corner, right? Um, Low occupancies and they haven't been booked for a really long time. I really want to understand what's happening. In these cases, it's rarely pricing. It's more to do with how they're distributed, what they look like, their messaging, etc., etc. Right? So you really want to understand those, right? Again, so you can now that you understand this, you can start playing around with this and try to make a little bit more sense of how I can compare various properties and figure out, especially if you have a bigger portfolio, which ones do I want to tackle and immediately go attack. Like I said, all of these cover scores colors are PriceLabs' own score, where we're comparing your occupancy to market occupancy, right? But you can also group these by, say, if you have created groups, you can say you can color them by groups. And so if I can see here, all of my like the green listings, which is in my group test group fee, are really getting booked. My purple listings, which is in test group pit, are not getting booked as much. I can also look at this by city, and I can try to make sense of this as well, right? Where, hey, which cities are booking faster, which cities are really getting bookings, right? Remember, all of this data that we're looking at is by stay month, because we're really trying to understand for that month, where do I want to optimize? But you can, and you can filter by any month to seeing how those months did for your properties, right? That's the 5 use cases that I wanted to cover, guys. There is a lot to unpack and a lot of different ways that you can look at these portfolio analytics, right? Would urge you to go into this help article, read about portfolio analytics. We'll also publish more shorter videos around how to make sense of portfolio analytics. But for now, I'd love to take any questions. If you have Q&As, ask them. I have about 10 minutes. Again, reminding you 5 quick use cases that we covered today. For my months that have gone by, if I want to compare my monthly performance, etc., I can do that quickly in my KPI section. I can also do it in my stay date trend section so that I can see how am I doing. And I can also do it quickly in my booking creation date, where I can see, say, for example, September, how many bookings did I get during the month of September, not for the month of September, during the month of September for future dates. Use case number 2, stay restrictions are important. Look at these graphs to understand what's happening in your business. I was on a call with a customer yesterday in Dubai, and they were like, I only get 1 or 2 night bookings. When we looked at this graph, most of their booked nights were coming from 3 to 4 and 5 to 6 nights. What was happening? They just get a lot more 1 night bookings and 2 night bookings. And so in their mind, their business is driven by 1 night and 2 night bookings. But in fact, in terms of total booked nights, 3 to 4 nights or 5 to 6 nights were a lot higher, right? And so for them, they were not using any stay restrictions. And what we ended up doing was we said, hey, why not put stay restrictions 3 to 4 nights, 5 to 6 nights, and then as we close in, then we drop, rather than allowing people to book 1 night or 2 nights even far out. Use case number 3, how are you pacing in comparison to the prior year, right? I know a lot of you are right now, depending on recession fears, etc., might be concerned about it. So you want to look at these occupancy ADR RevPAR graphs. Number 4, how am I doing in comparison to the market? If you click that drop down, if you select a market, you can quickly see how you're doing in connection with the market, both in terms of pricing and in terms of occupancy. And if you recall, you'd see here all 3 things. Once we add the market dashboard, you'd see your current occupancy and market occupancy. You'd see the last year, your occupancy and market occupancy, and you'd see the pickup in the last 7 days. All of those information are important. 5th use case that we covered is if I have a portfolio of listings, how can I quickly try to make sense of what's happening and which listings to attack, right? Cool. With that, let me hop into questions. All right. Roberta, in which graph can I find the market number of nights booked? Market number of nights booked. Assuming what you're saying is how many nights are booked in the market, right? One, if you, Roberta, if you are using our dynamic pricing, I'm in dynamic pricing, I've done review price already. If you're in neighborhood data, and if you just are on nearby listings, you will quickly see here what percent of the market is booked for a listing here already, right? If you're trying to get sense more for your whole portfolio, you can do that in portfolio analytics. In portfolio analytics, you'll hop into the pacing section. You'll have to have a subscription of market dashboards, the market that you really want to track. If you have few listings, just the neighborhood data should be good enough. If you're building a portfolio and you want to track that against market, then you would want to get a market dashboard subscription. And here you click market dashboards and choose the comp set that you want to track against, and then do that quickly. Hopefully that answers that question, Roberta. Antonio, is there any way we can have someone go over the data with someone at PriceLabs? A little bit of a complex ask, Antonio. Email us your questions of what you're thinking about, and we can see how we can help. Don't have a direct answer, right? For PriceLabs, for the most part, is self-serve. We do these training webinars to train you, but reach out to us. We'll see what's possible. Yeah. All right. Cool. Carlos, quick question. I hope, is the data inclusive of all the platform one uses? I use Airbnb, Airbnb, Booking.com. In other words, does it take into account reservation data regardless of booking platform? Carlos, good question. If you are using us with, and I don't know if everyone can see Carlos's question, I will actually, if you guys clicked Q&A, you will also be able to see Carlos's question now, I believe. So what Carlos is asking is, hey, I use Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. When I'm looking at this data, does it include all platforms? The answer is yes and no. I'll say yes, because if you're using a property management system that you've connected PriceLabs with, and then you're sending prices to Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com via the property management system, the property management system is pulling in all the reservation data, and then we're pulling in all of that reservation data and trying to make sense of it. So the answer is yes, if you're using a property management system. If you are not using a property management system, and if you are connecting PriceLabs directly to Airbnb and VRBO, we get data from Airbnb today. We don't still get data from VRBO. We're working on it to get direct data from VRBO. Ideally, I would highly recommend, if you're starting to get beyond 1-2 properties, consider a property management system. It will make your life significantly easier. Okay. Dive into Carlos, HostAway. Yes. If it's HostAway, we get that data. Willie, I have to step away. Willie, I'll follow up with you directly. Willie had a question around days since last booked is useful, but for some listings that are overbooked or occupied, you can have really, I'll probably will chat about it one-on-one. Cool. Thank you so much for hopping on a webinar here, guys, and sticking around. At, our team has shared a link for a form, Google form. Please, if you could go in and add feedback, do it now. Will take 2 minutes. Give it thumbs up if you liked it. Add feedback on what we can improve. Remember, this is one of our first versions of this webinar, and over time we will be improving this webinar. So let us know what you think, and that's it. Thank you so much for sticking around. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye bye. Tada. Adios.